Hello, everyone. It's me, Andrew. I'm here in my home in lovely Ligonier, Pennsylvania. Hopefully, you all have been having a good start to your week. Um, if you did not see yesterday's live, we debuted some new artwork from the Bright Circle collection. Uh, that we worked on together for the past couple weeks. So if you didn't see those, you can always go back and watch the replays on YouTube and on our Facebook, where I show you everything from making gel prints to collaging to painting to more collaging, and then, of course, to the reveal. Um, half, I think half, if not more, of those pieces have been sold. So thank you so much. Thank you to everyone who got some and who helped share the word about the debut of the new pieces. I really appreciate it. And I thank you so much. This is going to be hopefully, I'm still working on raising funds. So for the workshop that I want to take, uh, I'll need a little bit more. Um, so I, so here's kind of the story of how this new series came about, and it was kind of a surprise. Um, and what happened was I was working on the pieces, and I had gotten only about 12 or 13 of them done, probably less at that point. And I realized that if I continued at this pace, I would not be able to finish the whole 100 that I set out to do before the workshop. And at first I thought maybe I'll just do like little kind of debuts, little artwork dumps here and there. But I think what I decided to do instead was to kind of scale back and kind of embrace the original kind of concept of the 100 series. If you don't know what I'm talking about, when I was in art school, I had the fortune to work with an artist named Peter Hirschstoff, and he was one of my drawing teachers. And he used to have these marathon sessions where students were tasked to create 100 pieces in 24 hours or less. Usually it was 24 hours. And what the idea behind that was that when you have this amount of time, you can't really kind of mess around. You kind of have to dig deep into your process. You go to the things that your colors that you work with, you go to your imagery that you work with, and it's kind of a distillation of that. And over the years, I've done this periodically. I think it's super helpful for me as a project, and as a way to kind of reconnect to the way that I'm making things and at that moment. And I also think that it's also nice because I'm like, what do I do with these 100 pieces once I've done them all? So the idea was then that we would use those for fundraising efforts, and that's how we've done a lot of work at Star Cottage Studio, which is our 100-year-old schoolhouse that we're renovating to turn into my studio and the fulfillment center and our filming area. Um, so we've done a lot in a short amount of time, and that's in part because of our efforts with these little 100 marathon projects. So that's kind of the history in a nutshell. Let me go and check and see who's watching. I see a couple folks have tuned in. Michelle's watching. Hi, Michelle. Marianne's watching. Hi, Marianne. It feels like I just saw you, Marianne. We had book club last night, and that was pretty fun. It was a small group of us online. Marianne, Norma, Teresa, and me, and William in the background. But we talked about two different books, and I thought it was pretty cool. Um, our next book is The Witch's Night by Paula Braxton and Trevor Braxton. And the meeting is scheduled it's listed on the website. Now, I think I need to confirm with William, but I think we're going to temporarily halt the in-person meetups until we can like get a group of folks together, because the last couple times that we've tried to do it, we kind of just maybe one or two people would come, or it was just me and William kind of sitting there. So we just kind of need to get it built back up, and so, but we are going to continue to do the Zoom meetups, because I think those are fun and they're relatively easy. And I think more people have access. So we're going to try to do that instead of trying to do two. And it does take up a lot of time. So we're just going to kind of pare down, I think. Norma's watching. Hi, Norma. Barbara's watching. Hi, Barbara. Harry's watching. Hi, Harry. Yeah, so we've got, Michelle says, I got my blue and white one. Oh, I'm so pleased that you got that. Thank you so much again for your support. I really, really appreciate it. April says, that is very cool. Thanks. And Diane's watching. Hey, Diane. And Marian says, it was a good book club meeting. Oh, good. I'm glad you enjoyed. I never know how things are going to go. And I think sometimes one of the things I love about the in-person meetups is that I can make food, and sometimes food from the book, and you get like this whole kind of sensory experience. But, you got to do what you got to do. All right. So the new series that I'm working on, I've been working on in the background while I've been working on the other paintings and doing the other things that are required of me. And today was a super busy day. I did another interview for a newspaper and sent in some images for that. So hopefully we'll have a shiny little article to share with you all pretty soon. It's about our involvement with a program called Acre, which is they're trying to bring creative small businesses to the area and help get those going. And they're launching a new cohort in Johnstown and in Wheeling, West Virginia. And I think they're trying to expand it up to Erie and some other parts. So they've interviewed us about that. And hopefully, more people will take advantage of it. I feel like with those kinds of programs, you kind of get out of it what you put in. And we really kind of took that time to dig deep. And I think we got a lot. We did a lot in a year. And I'm super proud of our accomplishments. And I know I'm super hard on myself, and I always want to do more and do this and that, and go to all these classes and do all these events and all these special projects. But I think it's super healthy to kind of like pause and take a moment and reflect back on all the things that you have done and celebrate the small victories, and then realize, you've done quite a lot. At least, I think we have. So I'm really proud of what William and I have done this past year, and hopefully more good things, right? More good things in the future. So I did that today. I was going to head up to IUP for an opening. Sharon Massey is an amazing enamel artist and jewelry maker. And she helps head up the jewelry department and sculpture project there. And they do a thing called local exchange, which is a way to get art kind of out into the community as a project for their students to kind of think about how their work can be introduced into the world. And so one of the projects they did is they created these sculptures out of paper, laser cut paper, that are representational of things that you can't like feel. So there are things like nostalgia or music or success, and they would make these sculptures. And we've done this a couple of times where we've gotten things from them to show support for that project. One of the cool things they did was they took an empty storefront in the mall up in Indiana, and they turned that into a storefront, and they had the laser going and they had the different samples. And then the most recent incarnation was at Contemporary Craft when we were there for the Out of Hand Gala, and they had made their own kind of vending machine, which was pretty cool. And the students were there and they talked about their work, and it was really nice to kind of support them there. And the thing that they're doing tonight is they have an opening, and they also have this thing where they're making their own reality TV show. It's kind of like a spoof on their reality TV show. And I think it would have been really fun. I just think that by the time we run up to Indiana, it's going to be over. So unfortunately, that kind of got messed up. I had thought that it was a different day. And then I looked at my calendar and I was like, oh no. And I was also going to go to New York for the Museum of Art and Design's Mad About Jewelry event. But I don't think I'm going to be able to make it. I really wanted to go and support some of my friends and some of my mentors and people that I really admire in the field. I just don't think that I'm going to be able to do it because we're planning to go to Fire on the Mountain in North Carolina this weekend. And I don't know how it's like, you got, when you're trying to put too many things in a hat, there's a saying about that. So much stuff in a 10-gallon hat or something, 20 gallons in a 10-gallon hat or something like that. I don't know. So yeah, so I wanted to go to that tonight, that event up at Indiana University of Pennsylvania, but I don't think it's going to happen. And I know it's not going to happen because I put my soft pants on already. So once those go on, it's very unlikely that I'm going to leave the house. Um, so yeah, so I'm going to continue working on this series of collages. I kind of in my mind at first I was going to call it the Crystal Menagerie, but I think that I might change that title because it kind of morphed a little bit. So what I'm going to show you is the work that I've done, and I can kind of show a little example of how I put these pieces together. I'm not going to go step by step just because you've already seen some of this. So hopefully it's not too redundant for you all out there and you're not like, is he gonna like take a break from this gel press thing? Because yeah, but I think it's so cool and it's super addictive. And I have ideas. I have more ideas for more things that I want to do with it. So we're gonna see. Um, Marianne says, my soft pants are on too. It's rainy here. Um, yeah, it's sunny here. It's chilly. It's supposed to get down to the below freezing. This morning, super early this morning, it was all of the stuff was frosted over, and I know that was not good for the flowers. A lot of times, what happens is they get burnt that way. Um, and so I'm kind of dreading the damage that has been done. But, it is what it is. And if only the strong survive here, there's no babying happening at the Thornton Jones household. If you can't take a little bit of frost, then it's probably means that you're not going to survive very long. Harry says, I always wear soft pants and a t-shirt. And April says, I like your gel press art. Oh, good. I'm glad you like it. Michelle says, I have my shorts on. It's 78. And Harry says, it's 58 there. It was, the last time I checked, it was in the 50s here, but that was a long time ago. So I don't know. It looks warm from the window, but in all likelihood, it's probably still a little bit chilly. I wanted to go out and do some weeding, but I stayed up way too late working on things, and I didn't get a chance to do that. So we'll see. All right. So how about we flip this around, and you can see the stuff that I've been working on. William would be remiss or disappointed that if I didn't tell you to like and share these videos. So if you have it in your heart and you want to help boost the signal, please do so. We always appreciate it. It really does mean a lot to us when people believe in me and William and our vision. And we don't have a lot of money, and we never had a lot of money, and we've done things kind of a little bit at a time. When we first started the store, we started the store with $10,000, and when we went to the bank, I went to the bank with my business plan, and the manager of the bank at the time laughed in my face and said we'd be closed within 6 months. And here we are, 12 years, almost 12 years later. And we've done a lot of things. We've been growing our little empire slow and steady. And little by little, we've been able to do these things. And in part, it's because of the community behind us. We could not be able to do all these things without all of you. So it really does mean a lot to us. And like on some of the videos, we're like and share, and they're only about developing their following and getting millions of views and stuff, which is cool. I can see, I can appreciate that. But for us, it's so much about like how do we build a community based on a mutual love of creativity and self-expression. And so we may not have the biggest following in the world, but we do have our community. Our AG Bead fam is strong, or small but mighty. And we feel very fortunate to have all of you in our community. So that's the long way of saying, if you like and share these videos, it does help us reach out and boost the signal. So please do so. We would appreciate it. All right. I see a couple of folks that are like, done, done, done. Thank you. All right, I'm going to flip this around. You're going to see the ceiling for a second, or more than a second. I wish I had fancy camera options like William, but I only have one option. It's called back camera. All right, so here are the new pieces that I've been working on. These are the ones that are most finished. They still have a ways to go. I started these off by taking the backgrounds that I used in the previous. I had more. I had big pieces from another 100 series, and I cut those down. And here is the latest kind of incarnation of these. And I started off by doing a wash of color and doing kind of Mark Rothko kind of style kind of color fields and color blocking. And then I made some textures and patterns and prints with the gel press. And then, so I did a bunch of papers with that as well. And I did cutouts. And these are all done with an X-Acto knife. If I was smarter, I probably should have done it with a laser and then be like boom, boom, boom. But it actually using the laser takes um, getting all the files ready from the laser actually takes a long time. And by a long time, I've gotten it down to where I can do it pretty fast. But at the same time, that takes longer than if I just sketch something and cut it out. And I feel like this is um kind of more in line with some of the other work that I've done. Like the paintings that I showed yesterday are um they are like my work, but they are kind of like an offshoot of my work where it's more with those paintings it's more about layers and colors um these are too in a way, but they also kind of focus on these kind of fantastical elements, and they also talk about cutouts and silhouettes. And if you've been following my work for any amount of time, I've talked a lot about how my personal history has kind of shaped my artwork and how I see the world. And at one point in my personal family history, my brother went missing. And so for 22 years, he was missing. And one of the things that kind of developed from that is this sense of abandonment, but also forming a life around a hole in your life. So there are things like, we sell these pendants and they're cutouts, and the cutouts are like, they're cutout pendants, so fun, so cool. But they kind of started off in a way of showing like what was kind of missing in a way. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't think it necessarily matters about kind of that talk and my personal connection to it. I don't know. I kind of feel like once I make something and put it out into the world, it takes on its own life. And so when I put artwork out in the world, I know that the audience who views the work will see things and have their own connections and have their own interpretations. And I don't want to prevent that from happening. Like, I definitely kind of want to steer the conversation, but I don't necessarily want to dominate it, if that makes any sense. So, there's a lot of things that I'll put out there that I have certain specific touchstones in my life as a maker. Like I did a series called Strange Harvest, and that was definitely based on these chalkware plaques that were in my grandmother's kitchen, and that's kind of the inspiration for those. And those kind of anthropomorphic shapes and figures. So, I think it's one of those things where I have that touchstone, and if that touchstone aligns with yours and those things, then awesome. But if not, then that's okay too. I mean, we all see things from the lens that we have to see them through. So, like a stag means something to me, but may mean something different to you. And I think that there is a beauty in that. I think that there's something really magical about the idea that, you know, it has its own life and its own interpretations, and that by having that dialogue, we can kind of learn more about the world and how we see the world, by saying, "Oh, well, that means that to me, and this means this to me, and red means this to me, and this color means this to me, and this shape means this to me." And if we can have conversations about that, I think oftentimes in our world we are polarized by very strong convictions, but I think at the core of it we have more in common than we think. And in those kind of shared experiences and those shared iconographies and those shared archetypes, by having these conversations, um, we realize those things. Anyways, Norma says, I really like that first one. Thanks. Marion says, or the cricket. Yeah, some of the stuff is, after I layer up so much paint, I don't know how well it would cut. And I also like the quality of it. I mean, it's a little bit different freehanding stuff than putting it through a mechanical process. So there's a little bit so I like the kind of spontaneity that I can get with an X-Acto knife. I am not, I should preface this by saying I'm not really a paper cut artist. There are people who spend their whole lives cutting paper and creating these like beautiful I think it's called Sharon Sharon Schittrel. I can't say it. It's a German word. It means paper cutting. Starts with an S. There's a C and an H and a T and a Z in there somewhere. Um, and it's all about cutting paper and creating these very kind of delicate traceries. And so, anyways, I'm not a master at that, but I do have fun um, creating these cutouts. And you can see it in my work with the cutout pendants or with my work with when I cut out metal, because sometimes I'll do that as well. Um, yeah, all right. So you've seen this one. Here's the next one. And I should preface this by also saying, so one thing that I know that I have to do is I use the Yes Paste to glue it down because I ran out of glue and I'm waiting for the glue to arrive. If you've watched the video, you know I have a very specific recipe that I like to use. So I kind of had to use what I had, and it's shiny here. You can see it. So one of the things that I'm going to do is coat this again, but do it with like a matte medium and a dead flat varnish so that it's all kind of um, uniform more. Um, and so that's one thing, and then I probably will add some more elements to this as well. Here's a little fox that I made, and I'm gonna probably surround it with different florals, kind of like it's asleep or something, in a bed of flowers. And I also I really dig some of the cutouts Matisse did. And so there are some of those kind of uh, I don't necessarily like the word sensuous because that sounds kind of pervy, but I do like that sensuous quality of different forms in the body. And So I do like some of the shapes, like the sinuous curves and stuff that you can get from the architecture of bones and bodies and things like that. I also like when you can distort those silhouettes. And so if you put your arms over your head like this, it kind of creates an eye kind of shape. And so these body forms then become other forms, so I think there is like a kind of a fun play with that as well. I remember when I was a kid, sometimes we would go in front of the window and we would backlight ourselves and we'd almost do like a shadow puppetry. And I would make like an eye and we would make a mouth and the mouth would talk and stuff. So I think that like there's those little things, like those little family memories and stuff, and those childhood memories of nostalgia that you can see come up. Like this is a little mandrake. Um, I had never seen an actual mandrake until I was well into my adulthood. But I remember when I was little, we used to go to the flea market. We didn't have very much money. And so there was so, you know, you had to do what you had to do. And there was a guy who had this carrot truck, and you could fill a bag for $1. And so my mom, she would stuff the carrots in so full that it was almost like, most people they'd put like one or two or three, they put like a little handful of carrots in there. But my mom, since she's trying to get the most from her, the most bang for her buck, she would it like pack it in almost Tetris style, and the bag would be bulging. It would the way that it would do it almost become it was like almost looked like it was vacuum sealed. And like if you put one more carrot in, the thing would just like bust apart into all these different pieces. And the thing about that guy is, and he would just laugh and laugh whenever he saw her. And he had a whole truck full, um, so it wasn't like he was like hurting for it, and like she was taking advantage of him or anything. And I think he was charmed by it too, because my mom can be really charming when she wants to be, and she'd pretend like she couldn't speak English, even though she's been in the country for a long time. And so, anyway, so the carrots that he had were oftentimes the ones that the grocery stores would kind of, uh, they would, um, they wouldn't pick them for the store. So a lot of them were the ones that had like roots that were, or shapes that were very reminiscent of mandrakes, and they kind of had little private parts. And my mom would delight in the ones that had little private parts. And so um, she would show us the carrots and start laughing, and we'd all start laughing. And when you're a little kid and stuff, it's like potty humor. And so especially when you're kind of de- developing your and you're curious about your body and stuff. But anyway, so that's a long story short of how I am fascinated by roots that look like people that have private parts. So this one doesn't have private parts, but anyways, and like I know this is probably weird, but like with our dolls and stuff when we were kids, like growing up, like little, like my mom, she would sew the private parts on like super intricate. And like we would take like Cabbage Patch Kids. I don't know if you all remember those, but we would take those to school, and of course people like would undress and redress the dolls or whatever. And they were all the kids were like so fascinated by our toys because they had little private parts, and theirs were all like, you know, gender smoothed. Um, that's what it is, Norma. She posted with that paper cutting, that German paper cutting artist. Um, Sandra says, I love the deer one. Thank you. Michelle says, she will be a beautiful mermaid. Thanks. Donna says, hello all. They look great. They are in proportion. Good job. Thanks. I try hard, even though they're paper cuttings and they're relatively quick. I mean, quicker than the other paintings I made. I still try to work with composition, and I play around with it a lot before I glue things down. Bonnie's watching. Hey, Bonnie. Barbara's watching. Um, she says, Andrew, this Mandrake story is amazing. Oh, thanks. Donna says, hello, all. These look great, as I said earlier, in good proportion. Thanks. And Michelle says, that's cute. Harry says that it means scissor cuts in German. It is an art of paper cutting design. Looked it up. Yeah, so some of these are done with X-Acto knife, and some of them are done with scissors. And I have these really sharp scissors, and I get kind of worried that one day I'm going to accidentally cut a finger off. But, whatever. April says, what a great childhood memories. Your mom is great. Yeah. Marion said, love that carroty mandrake. Yeah, thanks. And then so here is this one is more complete. The other ones I feel like I can add more to. Like I will probably add some stems to this one and maybe a leaf to kind of cover up this weird kind of point where I combined it. And this one I may add some more elements to it, and maybe put a face or something. I don't know. I kind of like it as a silhouette, but I also might add to it. So we'll see how that goes. I know I'm adding more to this one, and I'm probably going to add some more to this one. This one I feel is more complete. So to finish this off, what I'm going to probably do is just seal it with a matte varnish, and iron it a couple times so it's completely flat or relatively flat. And then, so this one's mostly done. It's a Pegasus. When we were kids, we loved this movie called Clash of the Titans. And it was done with claymation. And I don't know about y'all, but I was so fascinated with like the owl and like all of the special effects. Like I was hooked on that. So you kind of see that in my work. A lot of times I pull a lot of things from mythology and from fairy tales and folklore and different things like that. When I was a kid, we were going through a lot of family kind of um, uh, drama. I guess you can just call it what it is. So there was a lot of issues going on in my family and a lot of like hardships. So one of the things that I used to do is I would escape into the world of books. I love books. I love paper. I love the idea of stories and being the storyteller. And so I would kind of escape my hardships by going into books and making stuff. And creativity kind of was always the solution to any problem that I had. If there was something going on in my life and it was hard, I would go and read a book, or I would make something, and I would kind of craft my own reality that way. And so there's a lot of stuff that I do, and there's a lot of imagery and motifs that I use that go and harken back to the mythology and fairy tales and kind of otherworldly things where all things were possible and what was broken could be mended and what was, lost could be found. And I think that there's a lot of that in my work still. I feel like even though I have grown a lot as a person and as an artist, I circle back to these different motifs and these similar kind of ideas and imagery. So with this piece, I do, um, it's more straightforward, but I do think that there's a lot of symbology that I work with also. So if you've seen any of my previous work, like the Hearts of Desire kind of series that I did, you may see some similar themes and similar images kind of pop up. And that's kind of the whole point of this exercise, as it was originally designed, is so that you get in touch with those ideas and images and the different things that connect you to who you are and your experience as a person. Um, Bonnie says, love that little root carrot. Thanks. Don't eat mandrakes though, y'all. They're poison, extra super duper poison. So they're charming and there's some cool stories about them and they're neat, but don't eat them. So even though it looks carrot like, don't eat. There's a lot of stuff that looks like a carrot that you should definitely 100% not put in your mouth. Um, Norma says, I remember that movie. Yeah, I love, um, sometimes when you're at that time, it seemed like that was like such the it was like the bee's knees. It was like so cool. And then in hindsight, you kind of see it was really kind of rough. But there is something charming about it. It's so specifically stylized that there's something so incredibly, I don't know. I think it's super charming. It's like when I watch something that has like really old CGI in it, it's almost painful, but it's also kind of like endearing because they were like, I don't know if you have ever felt like that when you've watched a movie and like the special effects were kind of like loving hands at home, but like at the time it just like blew your mind. And then like years later you look back on it and it's like you can see when you're like used to something else, it's almost rough and ready. But even though it's in that kind of in that state, it still hits those feelings or has that vibe, you know. Michelle says claymation animation was great. Yeah, we I sculpt, and a lot of my early sculptures were me trying to make those creatures. So I had little battle scenes of all these little Medusas and Gorgons fighting with their little snake hair. Um, Barbara says, "Keep on telling your story. It's so good." Oh, thanks. Michelle says, "Andrew, you can be a great writer." Maybe one day when I got some time, we'll see. So here's a little satyr or fawn playing the panpipes. I really love this one. And it's got a little badunkadunk, so that's even more cute. I have this um, seahorse with some fish. I think though, or these little minnow creatures. I think what I'm going to end up doing with this one is there's not enough contrast for me personally. And okay, so you may notice I'm picking stuff off like boogers, and that's because that yes paste is like using a glue stick with your fingers. And so sometimes you get these little gumballs in. So anyway, so some of the contrast is not as sharp as I would like it. So I may go in after I put the sealant down and just like lightly touch up some areas so that it pops a little bit more. In some cases, I don't mind when it kind of disappears because it's almost like in real life, there's a lot of the animals and their colorings and their patterns are designed to kind of sink in, recess, and become part of the scenery. So in that way, it's kind of cool. And a lot of times, like creatures in nature, they mimic other forms in nature so that they can blend in and become less din din time for the predators. So sometimes I like that, but then as an image, sometimes it's not as good because then you can actually see it. And so I think I might go in and crisp up some of the lines. I don't want to do too much because this is an exercise for me also in being more sparse. Because I do have a tendency to noodle around with things, and by that I mean like get hyper focused and get out these brushes that have like one single hair on them, and then like painting with like a microscope. And if I do that, I really do enjoy doing that. I'm not gonna lie, I do like a deep dive in with a very fine paintbrush. There's something very satisfying about that. Um, but what I will say about that is that if I do that, then the price of these goes up and up and up. And I want to make things that are even more affordable for people so that so that I can take my class. I really want to take that class, um, and we are very, very far away from reaching that goal of paying for that class. So I'm working as hard as I can to make these new ones, and hopefully, folks will like them as well, and that they're within reach enough that people can get one or two or a few of them, and you know, I can take that class and get that machinery. So sometimes when I'm making these pieces, what I do is I cut out bigger forms, and then I will sometimes overlap. And I don't intend to leave this little dingle dangle here. I'm gonna go and take and trim this off. But sometimes I think it's important to have that overlap because um, you can kind of move things around and place them in ways that if you just have it like I'm going to stick this and it has to all fit on this, then it kind of throws things off. So for me, I want this to be an overall composition where the eye pot comes around, and so I had to overextend a little bit here, but I'm just going to trim that little dingle dangle off and nobody will ever know, right? And I also think it engages the edge of the paper um, in a different way. Like sometimes it's good to stay within the surface, but then also sometimes it's nice to kind of trick the eye and play with expanding to the edges of the the work surface. Barbara says, I want that Seder. Oh, thanks. So these will all go on the online store. I don't know if we're going to be able to do it tonight or if it's tomorrow or whatever, but we'll send a notice out when these go live, hopefully sooner than later. In theory, William is at the cottage with Jen filming, so I don't know when he's going to be able to do it or not. And I do want to do some finishing up on these, especially because if I don't have that matte layer, it's going to be super, super difficult for him to photograph. So I want to make sure that these are in a state where I'm really happy with how they're finished. So it may take a little bit to do that. Um, Barbara said that's a perfect description of Yes Pace. I like it for bookmaking, but not as much for my own mixed media. Yeah, usually I use a combination of PVA glue, matte medium, and dead flat varnish for a lot of my collage pieces. But I ran out, so I also need. Hopefully, folks will buy these so that I can go buy some more glue, y'all. You never knew that glue was so expensive, but PVA glue is apparently not cheap. Especially, I would use Elmer's, but it's kind of and don't get me wrong, I love a good Elmer's glue. However, it is not always the best for mixed media artwork because if you get it wet, you can kind of rejuicify. I don't know if that's the right word. Remoisten. You can get it to be it gets sticky again, and sometimes that's good, but a lot of times that means that you get this weird kind of scummy effect, or you pull up pieces and there's these weird kind of gouge marks that happen. Um, and so, anyways, yeah. So that's why I don't use Elmer's glue, because if somebody was like, "Why don't you just go down to the Dollar General and get some glue?" Um, and I think that's one of the things is that also some of those school brand kind of glues are not archival. And so for me, I want to make pieces that are going to last a long time. I don't know if they will or not. I never know what's going to happen to these pieces once they go out into the world. And it's always really surprising to see my work out in the real world. I don't know if you all get that way, but like I am always like floored and humbled when somebody wants something and wants to make it a part of their home and a part of their life, like their visual life. I am just so humbled by it because I'm like, you like me? You really, really like me? Um, so there's that, but also like I want these to last a long time. And when I was a really young artist, I was like all about experimentation, and I still am to a very large degree. but I have a lot more knowledge now, so I can kind of do a little bit more science, a little bit more. I can do my experiments in a way that's not going to be as disastrous as I did. And that what I'm thinking about is I got really experimental and I was like, I'm going to do a whole series where I paint with spices. So I got this urethane mixture and I mixed it with spices and they were beautiful. I'm going to toot my own horn. I'm going to just tell it they were beautiful. They were vibrant. They were shining little jewels of paintings, and I was in love with them. Like there are the colors that you can get with eco pigments that are just so vibrant, and they're not synthetic, and it's from nature, and there's just a beautiful quality to it. However, 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 I did not know about light fastness back then. And so I sold some of those paintings and then I went and visited them in situ and saw them hanging on a wall. And the collector had placed them in direct sunlight and they had been bleached to almost a bone white. Um, and I was so disappointed. And I ended up having to take them back and repaint them with more stable paints and pigments. But so, anyways, that's me. Like, I want these to last. I don't want these to go to somebody's house and they hang it up and then it gets bleached out and, you know, it's not the end of the world. I mean, that it is an affordable piece of artwork that, it's not like we're buying like multi-million dollar pieces where we have armed security guards and I have to wear white gloves to handle. Um, but I still want them to last a long time and not have those problems. So, anyways, Marianne says seahorses have chameleon tendencies. Yeah. Lena says, me too, Barbara. And Norma says, I definitely want something from this series. Hard to decide which one I like best, though. Yeah, and I'm going to continue working on them. So you may like one in one phase, but then I might add something and it changes. So we'll see. So they are all very desirable. Thank you. Barbara says, may the odds be ever in my favor. Oh, good. Hunger Games style. Julie says, love your work. Thanks. Barbara says, PVA is high dollar. I think the golden medium do good, but so I do a mix. I love PVA glue, but it kind of looks plasticky, like how this kind of looks. You can see it. You can see that sheen. So I like matte medium. I don't like to use matte medium straight because it doesn't have the same kind of stickiness that I'm looking for. So it's all about kind of getting the right recipe, right? You want to get it so that it's sticky enough so that things stick, but also not too sticky, not too shiny, not too thick, not too thin. Because sometimes I'll mix up, instead of thinning it with the dead flat, I'll mix up a mixture of methyl cellulose, which sounds like I'm cooking meth or something in it, but really it's a plant cellulose fiber that they use. It's kind of like wheat paste almost. It's in a lot of food items that they use as a thickener. And it's basically just like ground up plants until and what that does as a glue, it makes things super flat. It's a really lovely kind of interesting collaging material. It's very thin and kind of almost watery. You can make it thicker. And there's a couple it's usually used in bookbinding. So this is something that used to be used in bookbinding a lot, but it's also something that a collage artist named Hannah Hoke used to use. and it's archival to a point. However, the thing with methyl cellulose is that sometimes if you're in a super humid place, it can reignite some of uh, that that quality of it, and it can like peel off like wallpaper. When wallpaper peels off the wall. So I don't necessarily like that, but I think it's a quality that's kind of neat. Not that particular quality, but how it gets super flat and super smooth. And I think it's pretty cool the way that happens. But it's like a leveling agent. I don't know if that makes sense or not, but it kind of helps smooth things out. But the other kind of gross thing about it, it's almost like working with snot. Um, like the clear snot, like not like not like tuberculosis snot, but like like when you have a really runny nose, it almost feels like you're working with that, and it's kind of gross, but it does what it does. And you can make your own, and I don't know, I think I learned too many things about certain stuff, and I'm like, why am I going to do that? Like you can make your own by boiling okra, and it gets that kind of gloopiness, that mucus. It's a mucilage. It's an actual thing. It's called mucilage, um, and you can use that as a glue. Um, and they used to use that in the old timey times, and it's also used in paper making, but as like a thickener, so that you can work on really thin layers. But anyways, I digress. Lena says, when I'm broke, I use Jerry Artorama brand. Yeah, that works too. There's a lot of different things that you can kind of um, kind of use. One of the ones that I used to use when I did great big paintings, because I work fairly small, so a jar that's like this big will last me months. But when I used to work great big wall size paintings, I would go through medium like I don't know like how, but it was a lot and frequently. And so I would buy it by the gallon jugs. And so with those pieces, um I couldn't afford those great big jugs. So I got from Utrecht, which is a brand that they have stores in New York, and I would adulterate it with other things. There's also a really wonderful store in New York called Art Guerrera, and they sell what's called dispersions, which you can take these super highly concentrated pigments and add it to your binder and make gallons of paint that way. And like a couple drops, you can make a great big thing of it. The only reason why I don't use those more is because I'm not in New York, and I like to pick out the colors. Sometimes are a little bit different, so I like to be able to see the colors. And so the next time I'm back in New York, I'll probably try to swing by if they're still in business, and see if I can get some dispersions. Paul says, awesome work. Thank you. That's high praise. Paul is having a show coming up at SAMA, which is the Southern Alleghenies Museum of Art. He's having a group show with his wife, Mandy, and his daughter, Claire. And it's kind of like the family band. So if you're in the area, definitely check that out. It should be a really cool thing. Paul is a woodworker, and Mandy, she does stained glass, and Claire does oil painting. So, and they all do all different kinds of crafty creativity. So, it should be an interesting show. Hopefully, we can go to that. Barbara has perfectly said, when you know better, You do better and you learn not to sell the experiments, light fastness, bad wire, etc. Yeah, at the time I was trying to make money however I could make it. And so I didn't know at the time. And now that I know, there are certain things that I won't use. Like I love alcohol inks. I love, love, love alcohol inks, but they're not light fast. So if I use those, I have to use them in a way that I'm using reproductions of that um, alcohol ink in my work. So so that I can get those qualities, but also not have them fade almost instantaneously. And they do fade. And I did do tests. So I know for a fact that they fade. There are people like, oh, it doesn't fade, but it does fade. Trust me. And you can do some cool things if you want to be artful in how you make them fade. But, anyways, when it says it's on. Marion says, I do like that. Marion says, I do like that rabbit that could do without the pink flower. There are more rabbits. There's a pink rabbit coming, but I don't know. I know you don't love the pink. One of the things that I do, since I'm working in such a big series, is that I will make different color sheets and then use those color sheets and then I kind of switch. So once they're all done, it won't be so pink heavy, but a lot of these are very pink right now. So it is what it is. But here's a little cat on a rug. And here's a cat on a pillow. And there's a couple things like I'm going to go back in and touch them up. Like there are these little places where the paint kind of created a booger. And so when that got scraped away, it revealed the paint underneath. And I'm not in love with like that little speck of hot pink. So I'm going to go over and fix anything like that where the stuff is kind of, you know, whatever. Man says it's your art. It is my art, and I do know that I can do what I want with it. But I do like to show that it's not all just like my pink phase. So, but this is since I did have that pink sheet, that's kind of where there's a lot of that kind of salmony pink color in there. So this is one of the birds, was kind of like this botanical. And also the thing about Yes Paste is that sometimes it can have things come up. So I do want to, and it's slightly tacky until it dries completely. So that is another reason why I'm going to coat these completely with a matte medium so that they are not only all uniform, but everything is sealed down. And I love birds. And I just love them. I think that for me, there's a lot of symbolism behind birds, but for a lot of my making life, I think of birds as like symbols of freedom because they can fly. And I know that all birds, there's different symbolisms for everything. Um, and not all birds fly, but for me, there's this idea of freedom and kind of like this lightness of air. Um, and I think that, if I had any ability, I think it would be able to fly, maybe. I don't know. We'll see what superpowers I develop. And this is one of the pieces where I started to move away from the idea of the menagerie because I had this idea that I would just do all these different kind of fantastical creatures. Um, but I also love like this almost folk art sensibility. And this idea of like surrealism. And some of my favorite artists are um, Lenora Carrington and Remedios Veros, and I love Frida Kahlo, and there's a whole group of artists who work in that kind of surreal, or who worked in that kind of surrealist um, mode. And I love the idea of magical realism. I think the world is so full of magic and kind of weird things and beautiful things and miraculous things. And um, you know, there's a wonderful Roald Dahl quote where he talks about like those who um, do not believe in magic cannot see magic. And I'm really butchering that, by the way, but it's kind of this idea that if you don't really believe in the idea of magic, then you can't really experience it. So for me, when I look around, I see kind of magic everywhere, and this wonderful current to our lives, and this kind of undertow of different happenstances and coincidences and cause and effect of energetic shifts. So I do think that if we open ourselves up to those ideas, we can see it more. And so I don't know. I kind of feel like that's a thing in my work. There is a little bit of those ideas in it. Um, Marianne says, "Ooh, that chair." And then Julie says, I need that owl. Oh, good. I'm glad that people are liking these. So this vase or vase, I'm eventually gonna paint little eyes into the flowers and then maybe do some more still lives. Um, in a weird way, I kind of feel like these are almost like an oracle deck. But if I do that, I kind of want to do it kind of going in knowing what I'm doing. Instead of just like, oh, this is, it kind of looks like that. Um, so I don't know. I kind of feel like it's one of those things that's going to be like my opus magnum, where I make my thing with all the symbolism of of all time, and research all different kinds of systems. And I've tried to do them in the past, and they've kind of flopped. So I think that while they have that kind of feel to them, especially because of their size and their shape. Um, I want to, if I do something like that, I want to spend the time to kind of create the infrastructure to build on that. I think that a lot of time systems like that don't always have a good resonance because they take other people's systems and they use those to kind of form the skeleton of their things, and they're not always compatible, I don't think. So anyways, that's kind of that idea of that. Lena says Baba Yaga house. Yeah, I love the Baba Yaga houses. I love the idea of having a house that has chicken legs. I'm just gonna say it. If I could live in a house that had chicken legs and walk around and then hide the door from people, I would definitely live in that house. It probably would not be the most beneficial of places with all the tchotchkes I have and all the art supplies and tools rolling around from Kingdom Come. But I always have I love this idea of being like on the road and having like this bead mobile and like having a little caravan that I drive around, and then I pop up in these little towns and I change people's lives, like that movie Chocolat with Dame Judy Dench. And I'm gonna be like, I don't know. I have these ideas that I'm gonna change the world through my artwork and through my creativity. And I have this idea of like being in a mobile little house with legs, but I don't know if I can make that work. So who knows? Maybe a retirement plan and drive around the countryside. And then I have this hummingbird. And oh, Marianne says it's magic. Everything would stay in its place. Um, Maybe. I think maybe that's the thing, like that maybe everything would stay in its place, but also maybe it wouldn't, and maybe there's something okay with that. It's kind of like throwing the bones, like you'd be like, "Oh, I'm gonna work on this thing," and then you just like have to randomly root in your pile. I don't know. It's a nice fun dream. I always think about things like I don't know if you all know this author. Her name is Diana Wynne Jones. She wrote Howl's Moving Castle and the Chrestomanci books. And those, I think, are some of the most wonderful little young um, young reader books. They're so magical and inspirational, and I think of it often, the house with many doors, and um, z- I think about different ways that we can kind of communicate and travel, and this idea that things like mirrors and fog are portals, and I have this idea in my mind that one day I'm going to write a short story about um, American chestnut groves being kind of these gateways. And anyways, I'm not going to spill all the tea. And then, so I have this little Minotaur dude. Um, and I like these. I really do. I'm very happy with how these are turning out and hope that other people like them as well. So I talked about a little bit about how I do these. And so, in a lot of ways, I work in layers, which you have seen, um, like this. Like this one, I might have to touch up a little bit. But so I started off with a bird form, and then I put this kind of like sun disk, and then I put the talons over it. And then I wanted to add some clouds. And I was thinking about sometimes how the clouds, normally a lot of people think of clouds as being all white, but I like when they, at certain times of day and twilight or sunrise or sunset, they capture the light and become all different colors. And there are these kind of dusty roses and vibrant burnt oranges and golden, even green and blue and purple. And it's a whole rainbow spectrum of color. A lot of times people think clouds and they think, well, white, fluffy things, but there's just something just so magical about, if you spend time looking at nature, you can see all those nuances. Um, and Granted, the color palettes I'm working with are a little bit wild, and there's not necessarily green birds like this, but also at the same time, I think that there's this kind of love letter to the natural world in my work. There's a wonderful MFA show um, that went up in Illinois, in Carbondale, University of Carbondale. Lisa Gerston. I'm probably saying her last name wrong, but she's a member of the Inclusive Blacksmith Society, and she did these really beautiful aluminum formed cloud shapes that she textured and created. But then on the backs of them, she painted them with these highly fluorescent reactive paints. And when they're lit a certain way, they just make the cast shadow that they bounce back off is luminous. It's like they're gems, and makes the whole room this almost like an atmospheric jewel box of colors and rainbows. And it's real subtle. Unless she lights it a certain way, then it's less subtle, but which is also cool. But I just love them. And I love that there was this thought of creating something that, for all intents and purposes, doesn't have color. water vapor doesn't necessarily have color, and but it's used as kind of this um, this point that um, I don't know how the right word to say how to say this, but it's like taking a drop of water and shining light through it, and it becomes prismatic. They become prismatic, and they create this wonderful, beautiful rainbow of colors. And we live in such a beautifully colorful world, and we're surrounded by such intense and beautiful hues. And I don't know, I just am so fascinated by color and all its many kind of shifts. And I don't know, I kind of feel like my world is, I'm most happiest when it's like fully saturated, like in springtime. I love that pop of that explosion, that riot of color of tulips and daffodils and all the lilies and all these bright colors. And especially after winter when things are kind of this monochromatic gray and brown, which is nice too. But I think that when you have that kind of riot of color, there's just something that is, it just excites your heart and mind, at least for me. um and as a gardener, I think I spend most of my time working on my spring display. I probably should get better at having year-round color, but I spend a lot of my energy making, like, preparing the beds and getting everything ready so that when spring comes, it does kind of blow up and has that kind of full effect. So, anyways, that's kind of a little glimpse into this latest series and some of my thoughts on art and color and shape and composition, and some of my family stories and personal stories and how I relate to the world through narrative elements. And I hope you all have enjoyed that. These will be on the website soon after I kind of work on them a little bit more, and when William puts them on the website. So it may take a hot minute to get them up, but I'm going to do my best to work really hard and get them up and finished. So, yeah. Um, Diane says Baba Yaga House is great. I live in a motorhome, but no chicken legs. Yeah, I kind of like this idea of getting a motorhome or some kind of like travel long. Those little cane hams that you can put on the back of your car, and just being able to go anywhere. And um but that, I think, I also like to stay in um my little my little den of protection too. So that's the other thing, is like I like to be in my own space. And so then you can kind of carry that with you wherever you go. But probably that won't happen for a long time. And actually, I don't know, like the logistics of being on the road is sometimes hard. Um, so that's a someday, maybe one day thing. Michelle says, beautiful bird. Thank you. Dan says, our Arizona sunset clouds are so awesome. I agree, but I think there's beautiful clouds almost anywhere you go. Marianne says, clouds are reflective. April says, thank you for sharing. It's my pleasure. Thank you for watching, and thank you for tuning in. I know sometimes we're known mostly for beads in this this world. Our business is mostly a bead store. That's how we make our living. However, I think it's good to show that you can be creative in lots of different ways, and that creativity nurtures and feeds other parts of your creativity. So when you look at these pieces, I hope people can see the bridges to my other work and how they inform each other. It's they're not islands, you know. They're not like standalone things that are all their own. They're all connected, like an archipelago. And so while I do work a lot of times in multiples or in series or in bodies of work, I like the idea that I'm paying homage to the legacy that I've created. So you can see when you look in the work, sometimes very literally, you can see the connection to older work. And I work a lot of times with collage, so I can sometimes take old work apart and incorporate that in my new work. And so, even if it's not always visible, because sometimes the things that I add in you'll never see. And I wonder sometimes why I make myself so crazy by adding a million layers when you only see the top one. Um, and so, but I do like the idea that there are those things that are inside and underneath. It's just like people, like, you know, you see somebody from the outside and you have your first impressions and you think you know what you know from what they show you. But within them, they also have the secret world, the secret life that makes them who they are. There's a myriad of experiences, thoughts, and feelings that help shape a person. And those things are not always visible, they're not always right there on the surface. So for me, a lot of times, what is interesting is kind of creating that architecture to build my pieces on and in a way show those kind of connections between my paintings, my jewelry, my writing, my whatever. They're all kind of connected. Harry says, as always, an interesting and entertaining presentation. Oh, good. I'm glad you liked it. Marianne says, can't wait to see where they end up, even the ones that don't call to me. Oh, good. Yeah, I think that that's one of those things where when I was a young artist, I used to get so concerned if other people would like or appreciate my artwork. And I think that that comes from this idea of seeking validation. I didn't get a lot of external validation. So, like, my parents are not the kind of people who would tell me that they loved me or that I did a good job or that they were proud of me. I try to do that for other people because I know what it's like not to have that. But so a lot of my early practice as an artist, I think it was trying to get some sort of validation, external validation from the world. And so when people didn't like my work, it would really bother me because I would try so hard to do everything that I could to make something nice so that people would like it and that they would, you know, love me. Um, and as I've matured as an artist, I'm not really interested so much in that. I am interested when things do resonate, but I'm also interested when they don't, because that's also kind of interesting to me, for lack of a better word. It's intriguing when you see what kind of compels people and what repulses people. And so in my work, sometimes I play with those things. Um, you know, I work with motifs that are sometimes a little bit darker or more edgy. And I know that that's not going to be for everybody. You know, not everybody's going to like the Krampus. One lady was said that my work looked demonic. Um, and, um, you know, at first I was like, well, let me tell you something. And, but then, on the other hand of that is like, you know, I do think that as a kind of a fundraising effort, I do want to make these kind of more accessible than some of my other things. Some of my other projects, you know, if they sell, sell. If they don't, they don't. With these, I do want people to like them because I want to take that class. But at the same time, I also am like, okay, well, not everything's going to be for everybody. Some people like pink, for example, some people don't. And I know that. And so I don't think that that's a bad thing. Some things you're going to be drawn to, and then some things you're just not. And I think that also comes into the idea of where things come from. Like, why do we have the feelings that we feel? Why do we like the things we like? But that's another conversation for another day. Harry says, I see echoes of your enamel in these. Yes, I agree. And I think that as my work with enameling kind of um, continues, that correlation will become even more strong. I think for me, one of the things I was working with, especially with enameling, was how do I bridge these two different parts of my brain, like, or my working practice as an artist. I make jewelry and I paint, but where do they kind of directly overlap? How do they kind of overlap? And enameling was and is a way that I can incorporate my um my my mixed media, my 2D kind of sensibilities into my small scale sculptural work with jewelry and wearable art. So there is that bridge, and it is something that I do think about. I do think about how all these kind of circles overlap and how they relate to one another, the magic spheres of our creativity, and how they're kind of accessible to one another, um, and how they build up each other. Um, so yeah, I'm glad that you noticed that. Um, Lennon says, not true. If the layers aren't there, you can't totally tell. You can totally tell when you take a photograph. Yes and no. It just depends because um, there are things that I do that completely erase in the underneath layers. Um, and even in these pieces, that seem so kind of straightforward, there are things in here that I purposely edited out. Um, One of the things that I have talked about this a long time ago when I was working with repurposing that one series, is that that series that I made at the time was in a time of my life that was really hard, and I was very unsure of myself in a lot of different ways. And so the pieces that I made were very sad. And I used to write a lot of these like diary entries into my artwork, and they were very, very sad. And um, I think, at the time, that was who I was as a maker and as a person. And that was who I was. But I didn't necessarily want that sadness to be the thing that was left behind. I kind of like the idea of taking that sadness and transmuting it into something else, and transmuting it into turning it and transforming it into something that would help me grow as an artist, as a maker, and taking these kind of sad things and not necessarily make them happy things, but definitely make them into things that didn't uh, cause me sadness looking at them. I don't know if that makes sense or not. I there's a thing about this stuff called this process called shadow work, um, and how there's a lot of ideas about dark and light, and how because of the culture that we live in, we associate light as good and dark as bad. But that's not necessarily always true. And it comes from a system that is kind of warped in a lot of ways. And I could go into it in get into more of a political discussion, but I won't, for the sake of brevity, because that's a big topic in itself. But this idea that that negative emotions are bad emotions, and that like positive emotions are good emotions. Like, so you should be happy all the time, as kind of like the default understanding of what it means to be like the best of the best is to be happy all the time. And as a person, I realize that that's not always true. You kind of have to feel. You have to feel your feelings. You have to embrace all of the aspects of your emotional life. And our feelings are our teachers. They tell us about ourselves and who we are as people and who we are as makers. And so I think they're super important, and if you ignore them, it becomes dangerous. However, with that being said, I do think there is a danger um when you lose yourself to the powers of those quote unquote negative or bad emotions. So when the sadness becomes so debilitating that it stops you completely from doing anything, and it causes problems in other aspects of your life, and it becomes the thing that it controls you, as opposed to you being in control of your thoughts and feelings and emotions. So I think it's one of those things where it's kind of tricky. It's a slippery slope to talk about certain things, especially emotions and about emotional health, because there is a lot of like good and bad versus, like what it is, what it really, And so when I talk about sad things, I just I don't want people to think that I think the work that I used to make was bad, or that sadness is necessarily bad, because I think it's important. It teaches us about ourselves, and you can't really appreciate certain things without other things. It definitely, by comparison, you see things in different ways, and it informs how you see the world. But I do think that those pieces, I wanted to give them that balance. I wanted to restore the idea of an ecosystem of thoughts and feelings, and not be controlled by past actions that were out of my control. It's not so much about, um, I think that those were very therapeutic pieces for me to make, but they were not necessarily, um, uh, I don't know how to say that. Uh, I think that they were good for art therapy to get me to work out through some things that I was dealing with, but they were not necessarily pieces in themselves that I would be proud to show, because they were so specifically tied to just um, that exercising of those thoughts and feelings through a creative process. And I think that something to be said, not everything is meant for public consumption. So when I make these pieces, as much as I'm thinking about myself, and as much as I'm thinking about the world and people seeing these, that are outside of myself, as much as I'm thinking about myself and my own histories, I acknowledge that these are going to be entered into the public sphere, and not, there are choices there. You don't have to tell or show everything that you make. Sometimes it's good to have things that are just for you. Um, and I think, because of the world that we live in, especially one which is based a lot on kind of the algorithm and how many views you get, and this kind of the cachet you get when you get 1 million views on something, it can be kind of a weird metric to be a maker in. I don't know if that makes any sense or not, but anyways, a lot of deep thoughts for a Tuesday evening. Um, and so, yeah. April says, and that's your name, Allegory Gallery. Love that. Yeah. Yeah, we pick things because there are stories hidden and revealed. Karen says, we love you and your work, Andrew. Thank you. And this says, I love your rich layers. Your works photographs well, but always looks better in person. Thanks. Julie says, such beautiful artwork, Andrew. Thank you. Marianne says, light equals good, dark equals bad, foundation of most philosophies, and could be a very long talk. Yes, yes, yes. I do think that I think especially now when we realize that those systems have been used to oppress people and used in a way that can control people, that is not necessarily awesome, you know? And like Barbara said earlier, when you know better, you can do better. And so I don't know. It's a big, long conversation. There's a lot to think about and talk about. And I think that's one of the wonderful things about creativity and artwork is that there's never a shortage of things that can be discussed. You know, I think sometimes people feel this anxiety over not having something original to say, but I think we all have different ideas and thoughts and opinions. And as we grow and learn, those things change and shift, and we have better understandings of the things we do and the impacts that they have on others. So yeah, so I hope nobody ever feels like they're intimidated by not having something original to say, because I think we all have that within us, and we all have that ability to have that something unique and wholly ourselves and authentic that is worthwhile and valid and is definitely something special. All right. Y'all probably have other stuff to do than look at the same collages over and over and over again. So, with that, I want to thank you all for spending time with me, for chatting with me, and sharing this time together. I know there are a lot of options in life, and that, you could be doing something else. You could be washing your hair. Um, Plucking eyebrows. I don't know. Um, and so when you choose to spend that time with us and you make that conscious decision to share in this community, it really does mean a lot to me, because I know that there are so many things in this world that you could be doing. And you've decided to do something with us. So thank you so much for that. I think that's a beautiful honor to carry with me, um, and for William to carry with him, and hopefully for you all to carry with you. Some of the things that we've said or done or shown or shared um, will have an influence for you in your life as a maker and a creative person. All right. Have a great night, everyone. See ya.